Please be seated. Coming up will be 4 panels on the most exciting topics in the current technology. The first panel features virtual reality. The VR industry is at an early yet fantastically growing stage. CES named virtual reality as one of the trends that must be followed. The coming panel will offer participants insights on cutting-edge issues in VR industry, by its current limitations, and future developments. The panel features an opening remark, a panel discussion, a closing remark, and a Q&A session. For guests who want to keep discussing, please be noted that during the lunch we'll have lunch networking event, and you will have enough time to interact with each other. Please be seated. Now, please join me and welcome the panel moderator, Gerard Lapout, the PhD students here at CMU, specializing in human-computer interaction. Welcome, Gerard.
Thanks, Lynn. I'm very excited to start and kick off this panel session for a very exciting topic, VR. We have a host of really esteemed professionals and colleagues here at the VR panel, and I'm sure you guys will enjoy all the discussions and the fruitful outcomes of this VR discussion. So we're going to kick things off by just introducing our first speaker. We're going to set up our slides here. Okay, so to kick things off, we're going to start with an introduction discussion by Tim Merrill. Tim is the founder and CEO of iTouch Reality and DigiCapital. Tim is a software engineer, an investment banker, a lawyer, and has written extensively for TechCrunch on VR and AR, virtual reality and augmented reality, and also in mobile devices. Tim is extremely well connected across the VR and AR industry, in mobile games and various industries in America, Asia, and Europe. Tim also attended both the Yale and Sydney universities. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Tim. Tim is actually going to Skype in and introduce himself and provide a talk about VR and just introduce us to the landscape of VR and AR and what this means in our current digital age. So without further ado, let me give you Tim. Hey Tim, can you hear us? Okay. Yep, we can see your slides. We're trying to set that up right now, but it's coming.
No, what I'm saying is on the screen that I'm sharing, sometimes with Skype I'm sharing the presentation, it shows a little video window for me, and that sometimes hides the slides. So if that's there.
Okay, we can see your slides and we can see your snippet over here, your thumbnail. Can you guys hear Tim perfectly well?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, we're good to go, Tim.
No.
Can you say something just so we can test audio?
Yep, take 1, 2, 3, let's see if this works. I don't know if it does.
Is that good?
Yeah.
All right, we're ready to go. Take it away, Tim.
Hi.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Tim Merrill. I've got a couple of companies. There's iTouch Reality, which is next generation visual messaging for mobile and mobile AR, and DigiCapital, which is VR and AR M&A advisor. My own background, I'm a software engineer, investment banker, and lawyer. If you want to contact me, you can see my email address down the bottom, so I'm easily fine. Now today we're going to talk about the market for virtual augmented and mixed reality, where they're going. Now, VR, AR, and mixed reality are the fourth platform technology change, the fourth wave. The waves that came before them each took longer, but each one that came after it was faster and had more impact than the one before. The PC started with the Apple II. It took about 20 years before that market hit its inflection point and really took off to the point where most people had a PC. Then you had the internet, which from the introduction of dial-up broadband took about 7 years to hit its inflection point when most people had proper broadband. Then with mobile, from when Steve Jobs launched the iPhone, it took about 3 years when he launched it to when many people had a smartphone. With VR, AR, and mixed reality, we're in the earliest stages, so the market hasn't hit its inflection point yet, and we'll talk more about when that might happen. Let's look at what went right and also what didn't go right last year. We'll start with the things that didn't go right. Oculus and HTC Vive both had some delivery issues, and in some cases there were some dropped orders at launch. With Oculus, they didn't launch with the touch controllers bundled, and when they did start selling them later in the year last year, the full system price for the headset and the controllers meant the price was similar to the HTC Vive. With Samsung, we had the Galaxy Note 7 disaster at the end of last year, and that meant that they sold fewer Gear VR headsets that were redesigned to go with that phone. So the mobile VR market didn't get as many install base units as they would have. And lastly, Magic had a lot of speculation about the technology that they used to raise $1.4 billion that they've raised over the last few years. So that's the difficulty. On the bright side, you have Windows 10 announced by Microsoft, which is high quality VR with inside-out traditional tracking at a fairly reasonable price point. Intel, they're going to be launching an all-in-one VR system just to require a PC. Sony happily launched PlayStation VR, and Google did very well launching both Daydream and also Tango, mobile augmented reality phone. Lastly, you had Snapchat, Snap Spectacles, which, while they're not augmented reality glasses, took away some of the stigma that had been there from Google Glass. And lastly, and most importantly, Pokemon Go, even though many people in the industry don't like to call it augmented reality, gave consumers their first taste of what AR looked like on a phone, and was very successful commercially. So it was a mixed year that changed the market's trajectory. We forecast that VR would deliver $3.8 billion and AR $0.6 billion revenue. What happened with VR, because of the issues that I talked about just now, VR delivered $2.7 billion, so less than we had expected. But AR, because of Pokemon Go, delivered $1.2 billion, so it really outperformed. So in round, we had forecast $4.4 billion, market delivered $3.9 billion of revenue last year. So we were looking optimistic, but the market was broadly, in terms of scale, where we expected. So for VR, the market's segmented into three broad markets. There's the Explorer market, which is from free up to $129, everything from cardboard through Daydream up to Gear VR. It's a great place to start. It's the largest install base for VR, and we expect it to remain the largest install base purely because of the price. It's a great place to experiment. Then there's the Enthusiast market, below $400, where you have Windows 10 VR launching this year, and PlayStation VR. For console and PC VR, that will be the largest install base within the high-end market for VR. The last market is the specialist market. We have less than $1,500 total system costs. That's HTC Vive, Oculus, the Intel system when it launches. They give the best experiences with traditional tracking and so on, but because of the price, particularly because you have to have a high-spec PC and high-spec graphics card to run them, they risk being a very low volume market. You know, it's great, deep, that many users in terms of overall install base. For augmented reality, Pokemon Go, again, led the way. AR faces 5 consumer challenges, those 5 big challenges for AR to become a mass consumer market. The first is a hero device, so an Apple quality device, whether put out by Apple or somebody else. The second is all-day battery life, because AR can't replace the laptop in your pocket once it's all day. The third is mobile connectivity. And those you need to be able to use AR outside of Wi-Fi range wherever you are. Fourth is app ecosystem, and that basically means an app ecosystem as broad and as deep as, say, early mobile, so that it could be a genuine use of itself. And lastly, telco cross-subsidization. So the cost is the same as the phone in the pocket already. Now, most of the focus discussion tends to be on that hero device. If you release it, what will it look like and when will it get in? But 2 of the other challenges are non-trivial problems that are difficult to solve. All-day battery life, when you have a lightweight set of AR glasses doing heavy-duty AR without hot swappable batteries or a separate battery pack, which is fine for enterprise users but difficult for consumers, is something that we don't expect to solve this year or next year. It might be only 2019 when it's solved. Basically, it requires a step change in terms of either battery technology or miniaturization of power consumption by all the chips that run everything inside AR. And the other one is app ecosystem. Like all early-stage technology markets, particularly consumer platforms, it's very difficult for developers to be able to justify the investment to produce great applications when the installed base isn't there yet. It's the classic chicken and egg problem that every consumer technology platform faces. Tim Cook, Mark Zuckerberg, Satya Nadella, Sundar Pichai, I was discussing this with Robin Lee from Baidu at dinner last year. All are excited about where augmented reality is going. And in particular, Mark Zuckerberg's come out and said that he believes that mobile augmented reality, not smart glasses, will be when most mass consumers really get to experience AR on a scale. The reason for this is that mobile AR, and I'll talk more about Google Tango in a second, solves 5 major challenges for AR broadly. The only difference is with the phone that you currently have in your pocket, it doesn't have the sensors, the additional software, the positional tracking to be able to deliver the sort of thing that you saw with Pokemon Go, but don't rely on great positional tracking. And also, mobile has a secret weapon, and that's phone replacement cycles. When you look at phone replacement cycles, we've gone up from less than 2 years up to around 2.5 years in the last 4 or 5 years. Now that time is a major headache for Apple, Samsung, Xiaomi, and others, because it reduces the ability to sell devices and it has an impact on profit. While neither Apple nor Samsung has said anything specifically about their plans, our base case is that both Apple and Samsung could deliver mobile AR next year. It's possible that they could launch this year, and we'll find out that in September when the next iPhone launches. Now the beauty of that is, if you look at Google Tango, which is the first true step in mobile AR, where there was a phone that's already been released, Asus is coming out with a new one, I think it's this month. It allows you to do everything you need to do for AR, but it's built into the phone. So you're going to pay your new iPhone or Samsung or Xiaomi phone anyway. If it has the additional sensors and software built in, so that you can do mobile AR, the cost of that is free. In other words, there's no marginal cost to the consumer, and that's what it's going to be an inflection point for the whole market. One of the big questions is, well, with smart glasses, everybody's very excited about who's going to deliver them, what are they going to look like, when are they going to get here. Now, you'll already be able to buy HoloLens or Meta or OBG or others this year. The price point is substantial, and the functionality is not enough to have solved all 5 of the major consumer challenges. So this year, going into next year, our smart glasses will remain either enterprise or consumer specialist devices. In other words, something you can buy as a discretionary purchase in addition to, not instead of, new phone using privacy. So what does that mean for installed base? Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. It's all about the base. If you look at the market so far, it's been dominated by VR, and we expect that to continue this year in terms of installed base. But if we're right about the timing, and mobile AR is introduced by Apple and Samsung and Xiaomi and others next year. Then you go from a market with a very low installed base, compared to smartphones, to one in the tens of millions and then hundreds of millions very quickly. In other words, every 2.5 months on average, you're going to buy a new phone anyway. If it's a mobile AR-enabled phone, then you must have an AR plus. That's what's going to be the inflection point for the whole market. We think that's likely to be next year. But again, our underlying case is that's 2019 outperforms this year. So we'll see. Whatever you look at, it's going to be a big market. Yes, mobile AR is the largest market, then mobile VR, then console and PC VR, and the last smartphones in terms of installed base. So when we look at revenue, it's a similar picture. You look at what the market did last year, less than 5 billion in revenue. This year, it'll be around, it will still be single digits billions, led by VR. If we write about the timing, AR, if we driven by mobile AR, it's going to kick in next year, and then very quickly pass VR and become a much larger market. So again, base case is if doing next year, the downside case is it won't ramp up the year after. Either way, even the upside case, the numbers are all going to look large once mobile AR kicks in. In terms of business models, it might not be what you expect. Based on looking at use cases, community deployment, our view is that 3/4 of the revenue of the market will be driven by hardware sales, ad spend, e-commerce, and mobile network data revenues. So you'll have in-app purchases, enterprise, subscription streaming apps, and so on. But those 4 big areas are just areas that we expect in terms of revenue. And if you look at when Alibaba invested into Magic Leap, this question would be, why would a Chinese e-commerce giant invest into a Florida-based hardware startup that hadn't released a product yet? We believe that the reason is because of the potential for commerce using AR. You know, imagine looking at yourself in the mirror, trying on certain clothes. It's a more compelling, more immersive experience in terms of the sales process, and therefore should increase the conversion rate in overall sales. In terms of where the market's headed long term, you need to look at the big players, in other words, the platform model. What folks like Facebook, Google, Apple, even Meta, Microsoft, Samsung, and others will do is determine where the platforms are. And even though there are literally hundreds of startups in China, the US, and Europe in the space, all of them pivot, all of them determine where they're going based on what the big players at the top do. So to wrap up the investment and financing. From an investment perspective, the last 12 months, there's been $1.5 billion invested. And we just released our new Augmented and reality report analysing all the data. The bulk of the money has been going into solution and services, video, games and peripherals, and then a range of other sectors. Now, I know this doesn't include the investment into Magic Leap in the first quarter of last year, so that doesn't have that big investment there, but it's still a large number. And what we're seeing is investment in the between $300 to $400 million a quarter range currently. That's been fairly consistent for the last year when you check out some of the big investments that happened last year. From an acquisitions perspective, it hasn't really been an acquisitions market yet, and that's very critical in this age of technology market, where it's been making investment for growth rather than acquisition for consolidation and cost savings. So there's around 600 million in M&A in the last 12 months. The bulk of that has been technology, specific technology solutions, solving either hardware or software issues. So, if you want more detail, you'll better which throughout the report is on our website. Feel free to go and have a look. And again, feel free to contact me if you have any follow-up questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Let's give Tim a big round of applause. So hopefully that gives you a very good overview, not only about what AR and VR is all about from a technical perspective, but also the market fluctuations and ecosystems and the economics behind like how VR is going to evolve in the future. So that was a really good overview from Tim. So we're going to have another speaker, Alan Young, which is also going to be one of our panelists after this talk. So Dr. Alan Young is the Executive Director of Center for Augmented Cognition and also a Chief Scientist at the Institute of Engineering Leadership at UC Berkeley. He also serves as the co-founder and CTO of GraphT Incorporated and also the Chief Scientist of Immurex Incorporated. Dr. Alan Young has a lot of experience in this area, and he previously served as the CTO and acting CEO of Athir Incorporated. He's also a researcher, so his primary research areas include high-dimensional pattern recognition, computer vision, image processing, and applications in motion segmentation and image segmentation aspects and face recognition. So he does a lot of work in areas that are related to VR and AR, and he has obviously published lots of book chapters, journal papers, and conference papers in this field, and also inventors of multiple patents in the US. So let's welcome Dr. Alan Young, and he's going to give us a talk on virtual reality and augmented reality. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you very much for the long introduction. So I think that really, just gave us a great, overview about the market, investment, and so forth. So I have 10 minutes. What I'm going to do next, I want to, give you a more personal view of some stories that I have learned during the course of the past 5 years. When I first get involved with the AR and VR area. Especially, I know that many of you in the audience coming from the entrepreneur background, or you want to do a startup. I think that some of the things at the operational level, when you're trying to trying to commercialize the technology, how it's going to find the right market, especially if you're interested about the AR and VR. So again, I think that we don't have to say too much. 2016 is really a banner year. We have seen so many great products coming out to the market. And for the first time, by saying products, you can actually open your wallet and then you can buy some of these products. But if you just look at some of the examples of the market leaders, including Oculus, HTC, Sony, and Gear VR, and HoloLens. And you start to see little different stories. First of all, and as Tim just mentioned, and most of the AR, VR, virtual reality products, they are still stationary, which means that you have to plug in your VR headset into a stationary computer. And we have some mobile VR or AR products like Gear VR or HoloLens. And number two, you also want to notice actually is the weight. So because the weight translates into the user experience. So most of these products, their weight is about 500 grams, right? So if you compare with, if you wear glasses, most of the glasses, the weight is less than 200 grams. Some of them are as light as 100 grams. So that really presents a problem, for people even wearing glasses to be able to consume AR and VR content for a long time. And then finally, Tim also touched bases about the sales, right? So if you are an entrepreneur or you are an investor, looking at investing in certain technology, you are really focusing on the sales. Now in 2016, Oculus sold about 300K units, HTC 400K. Now if you look at Sony for the first 4 months, they sold almost about 1 million of their units. And if you combine Gear VR and the cardboard, more than 10 million, right? So somebody actually put the number as high as 40 million units. And you also have HoloLens, which only sold as developed kit about 1,000, right? So now I'm going to tell you, some of the lessons, I think that we can deduce from the market. The number one, the question we can ask is that, what's the difference? What creates the difference between the sales and then subsequently the user experience in VR versus AR, right? So here's the personal story I can tell you. So in 2012, I came out from Berkeley and joined a startup company called Athir. So it took us 3 years to go to market and to make a AR glasses you can buy today, and then you can go to the Athir website, and then that costs you about $4,000. So that's in 2016. Now look at Oculus. Why Oculus was worth $2 billion when Mark Zuckerberg purchased Oculus? Well, in 2012, when they launched a very successful Kickstarter campaign, it took them 3 months to fulfill all the online orders. And then the price they asked is $300 in 2012, right? So why is that? So the reason, I believe, is that for Oculus, they have actually heavily leveraged a lot of mature technology from the mobile industry, from the smartphone industry. While if you are in AR companies like Fear, even HoloLens, right? So the company size doesn't really matter. HoloLens also sold for $3,000. So you have to develop, one of the kind, really, really early samples, which will cost you a lot of money. So I think Tim showed up this, great double S-curve example. You will learn actually a lot from many business schools. So at the basic, I think the lesson we have learned is that why virtual reality can make an impact as early as 2012, because they actually leverage an existing mature market, which is the mobile industry, the smartphone industry, which is the first curve. And then they make a jump, right? The leap of faith. And then they create a new technology curve, which is called virtual reality as we know it today. And however, if you are talking about AR, augmented reality, so you have to still invent a lot of technology. They are not ready for commercialization. So you are actually still in the first curve. You are pushing a really, really heavy rock up the hill. So I think that is the first lesson. Create really, really fancy forward-looking technology may not necessarily translate into a good product that you will receive from the market. Well, then how can we find your product? How can you find your customer, right? So if you have technology. So let me actually make another example. Mobility versus mobility. We know that before HoloLens, there was another product, right? So called the Google Glass. Arguably, Google Glass is lighter than many of the other products in the mobile industry. In fact, it can also run certain type of apps, Android apps, right? So in 2012, when Google announced the Glass product, so the asking price was about $1,500, right? Now, you remember in 2007, Steve Jobs also launched the first generation of iPhone. At that time, the ask price was about $500. Right? And now we know that iPhone has been a great successful story for Apple, and many copycats. But the Google Glass has not been a successful story, right? Why is that? Now, how can we learn from this kind of story? Well, I think that one way to do this is to really learn from the master, right? The master of salesmanship, Steve Jobs. Now, if you recall, I don't know how many of you actually watched the launch video, when Steve Jobs introduced iPhone. How did he introduce iPhone? So what is the iPhone? So he defined iPhone as an iPod and a phone and an internet communicator, right? An iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator. So for each of these use cases, you can really quantitatively evaluate how much value you can get from buying into iPhone, right? But however, today, if I ask you, what's the use case of Google Glass? Right? Probably, you don't have too much to say about how Google Glass can help you on a daily basis, right? So, and you relate Google Glass with a typical daily activity that you will do on a daily basis. Probably you couldn't, right? So I think that the second lesson we can find is that, proven utility functions oftentimes beat, the form factor of Alienware, right? So the cool form factor is one thing, but you really have to find the right utility function that relate to the customer that you want to reach. Hopefully those activities are sticky. So finally, I want to talk, going back to virtual reality, right? And so if you look at virtual reality, well, if we want to find the right market to penetrate, so one thing we can look at is, what are the daily activities people do the most. So I'm showing here a table from the 2015 U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Well, so if you look at the list here, the number one of the daily activity is sleeping, right? So normally, people spend 8.8 hours sleeping. That's good. And the second one is working, right? So that's why computers still sell, very, very good. Now, what's the third one? That is interesting. It's watching TV, right? A lot of people like to watch TV. In fact, if you believe the labor statistics, watching TV actually consume more time than people socializing and playing sports, exercising, and recreation, including playing games combined, right? So can we actually use virtual reality to actually reinvent the TV? That's the question, right? Now let's think a little bit further. Why people like to watch TV? Well, so there's another story, there's another study commissioned by Netflix in 2013. So the number actually told us that 76% of people saying that they watch TV because they want to escape from the busy lives, right? And then 80% of the people saying that they like to watch multiple episodes in a marathon in one setting versus watching single episodes one at a time. And 75% of people saying that they are really craving for long narratives than short social interaction. So these numbers are really, really good in terms of making virtual reality to reinvent the TV entertainment system, right? So I think that I'm running out of time. Let me just quickly make a case about that. So I think that if you really look at the transformation of entertainment, digital entertainment, so the golden standard is the TV, right? So, and then from the right-hand side, you have movies. Everybody knows that if you go to movies, you're going to pay $20, right? So there is a proven revenue model for that. And then on the left-hand side, you also see the people starting to cut the cable, and then you have smartphones and so on and so forth, and then the laptops, right? Now, and then we also see that, so there is a recent trend that more people are watching TV and video on the mobile platform, and then the stationary. So people are watching TVs on the smartphone and on the rise. That actually presents a conflict of mobility and immersion. The reason is because the more you use the smartphone, the less immersive you are going to get, right? So you are not getting the IMAX experience when you watch TV. But people are watching TV more and more, videos more and more on the mobile platform. So I think that there is a case to be made that virtual reality, if it can be made mobile, can reinvent the personal cinematic experience. So we have seen that some of the products are actually moving towards the top corner to be both immersive and also both to be mobile. But however, we are not there yet. So the technology has not enabled us to reach to that goal. So what we actually want to develop is a holy grail of personal cinematic experience. So it is mobile, at the same time it is immersive, right? So at the end, so also any head-up display has to be part of an ecosystem that really give you that channel the emotion that you have that connect to your personal life. So I think that the take-home message I think is that the virtual reality can be the last screen that you will need to consume all the entertainment that you're going to have. So in closing, so this is the basic business thesis that one of the startups I'm involved with, called Immerex, is creating right now for cinematic VR. So I know I'm running out of time. So if you want to know more about the story, please visit the website immerex.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan. That was a very inspiring talk. It gives you a very good sense of what the ecosystem looks like, all the market opportunities and all the economics behind VR and AR. Really inspiring. So now we're going to move on to the panel portion of this session, where we're going to have all our panelists sit in our very comfortable couches, and we're all going to discuss, have some open questions, and the audience is also encouraged to offer their questions. There's going to be a QR code posted up there. First, let me introduce our panelists. Dr. Alan Young, first, is our panelist, so you can feel free to grab a seat in one of the couches. We're going to have more discussions with Dr. Alan soon. And also, I'm going to introduce Regis Kopper. He's an assistant professor at Duke University under the Department of Mechanical Engineering and Material Science. He's done a lot of work in this space and also has a lot of experience that we can all learn from. Let's give Dr. Regis a big round of applause. And then our third panelist would be Marcy Boyle. Marcy is a co-founder of Hotbit VR, an upcoming platform for comedy, stunts, games, and art in VR. So a dual citizen in Ireland and the US, Marcy graduated from Barnard College, and she was chosen by Oculus for their launchpad in a highly selective program for leaders in VR. So let's give Marcy a big round of applause. So I'm going to be moderating this panel. I'm going to sit in this comfortable couch here too. So there's a QR code up here that you guys can scan, and if you have questions, the questions are going to stream live here from this iPad, and so if you have questions, I'm going to select some questions here for our panelists. Okay, first of all, thank you guys for coming here. This is a very inspiring and obviously a very timely talk and session for everybody here on this stage. And so, this is a very great honor for you guys to be here and be part of this discussion. So first of all, just to ground everybody into what this VR and AR thing is all about, can you guys just give us like a layman terms, definition of what you think VR or AR is, and can you give us examples of what VR and AR experiences there are that our audiences here can relate to, in the movies or in some entertainment industries? Like, give us some of those examples of what you think are great and delightful VR and AR experiences. So why don't we start with Dr. Allen here? Or, yeah, do we have other microphones that we could use for our panelists? Or we could just give the microphone away. Yeah, so let's start.
All right, so sorry to be the first again. So I think that, so let me just make one example. I always like to use this example to start that, I know that many of the audience are Star Trek fans. So that's probably the earliest prototype that you see from Hollywood. In fact, so there's an argument that whether the technology really coming from Silicon Valley or from Hollywood, right? So if you're Star Trek fans, you might probably know that there is a device for holodeck. So in this case, you are on a long intergalactic journey, and then you are homesick. Then you go into this room, and then this is like a room, not that different from this room. But then the room transfer into a beach, transfer into your hometown, and then you can dance with people, has music. So I think that is really a early prototype of virtual reality.
Right. So yeah, I think so. Virtual reality, you can think of any experience that is that takes you away from your immediate surrounding experience, but keeps you with a realistic perception. So one thing that we can think about of virtual reality in terms of kind of an ultimate virtual reality experience would be the Matrix, and I think all of you are familiar with that. Of course, that is not what we are used to think about in terms of virtual reality, where you put something on. But if you think of the ultimate user interface, it's plugged directly into your brain, and it basically changes your perception into a synthetic world that is generated, that you don't even necessarily notice that it's synthetic, but it gives you a realistic experience. So we could think of striving to reach what the Matrix gave us in terms of the experience. Of course, we don't want all of the bad stuff that came with it.
And I'll give my favorite example of depiction of augmented reality is John Carpenter's film They Live, where the lead actor receives sunglasses that let him de-augment a reality and see secret messages, subliminal messages revealed on society. So that's a Hollywood augmented reality depiction.
Those are great examples, and I think it ties into the possibilities of what we could do with both mixed reality, VR and AR in several contexts. Not just in gaming, but as you can see, lots of people are thinking about this very important area. So one very interesting question that I've always had in my mind was that VR is not a new thing, right? It's existed for decades, basically. So what do you guys think made, what's causing the resurgence in VR right now that, did not happen like in the 90s or in the 80s or when VR was originally conceived? What has changed in the industry today that made it resurge?
Alan touched on it. It's the smartphone, really. The technology that the smartphone put in everyone's pocket can be leveraged to bring virtual reality to a broader consumer base at a relatively affordable price point. It's really why $2 billion went down from Facebook to Oculus.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think the technology of basically cheap, very high quality displays allowed VR to get to where it is now. But I just want to give you a very brief history roadmap of VR. And I believe not many of you are aware that the first interactive head-mounted display that displayed real-time computer graphics was actually built and designed and built back in 1968 by Ivan Sutherland. And we think of, okay, VR is something that started around 2012, 13 with Oculus, but the the research to get there has dates back to a long time. But so fast forwarding from 1968, and you all should read a very short note by Ivan Sutherland, which is called "The Ultimate Display." You can look it up online. It's just 1.5 pages of a speech that he gave at a conference back then. But he had the best, today even, the best vision of what a virtual reality experience would be. And we are still striving to get to the point that he describes. And keep in mind that 1968, that was before even the graphical user interface. So it was pretty visionary. So fast forwarding to the 90s, there was a surge of VR back then that people thought, okay, so VR is finally here to stay. Although the problem back then is that the technology hadn't caught up. Displays were very premature technologically. There wasn't enough real-time graphics quality to get there. So that was around the time that academic research really picked up on VR. But it was really expensive still back then. Just a head-mounted display would cost in the order of $10,000 to $50,000, which are a couple orders of magnitude more than what we have today. And then, so with, like Marcy said, with 2012 purchase of Oculus by Facebook for a couple $1 billion, that basically raised everyone's eyebrows in the industry to VR, and now I think that's manifolds multiplied, both in VR and AR in terms of the investment that's out there.
Right. So I think that to answer your question, we also have to, dip back into the memory lane. I think as many of the panelists mentioned, I know some of you are eager to jump into Silicon Valley or doing startups. But in fact, using AR VR as an example, don't forget that actually before 2012, there has been 50 years of AR and VR, people are doing in their labs. So let's give the credit when it's due. So it's actually 50 years of research going into AR and VR so that we can actually have a breakout in 2012. Now going back to your question, why that happened in 2012? I think it's because the commercialization, the readiness again. So I think touch base is about this disruption. The disruption can happen mainly because of three things. Number one is processors, right? So the processors are getting mobile, so it consumes like 1 watt or less, for a typical iPhone. And then you also have display. The display actually is very, very important. The reason is because the display industry is not enjoying the Moore's law. The reason is because the display industry is being very, very concentrated in very limited number of people, and also the optics, right? So if you look at Google Glass, the reason is because before AR and VR, if you're optics company, the two major markets that you can only make money, one is making camera, and the second one is making glasses, right? So, but suddenly you have AR, VR. I think that that will really bump up the investment, also research in the optics industry. The third one is sensor, right? So specifically for camera. Now my background is in computer vision. Now before 2012, if you want to get a camera, go talk to Omnivision. You can get a camera for a few bucks. But then you see that a lot of these major IT companies buying camera companies that has never been done before, like Kinect, like Soft Kinetic, and Apple, and also Microsoft, and Google has Tango, and so on and so forth. So I think it's the combination of the commercial readiness and also the cheap price of these three components actually contributed to the watershed moment in 2012.
Okay, so just to summarize, I think you guys pointed out a couple of things. One is the readiness of the hardware. Right? So now we have hardwares that are faster, also mobility. It's smaller, faster, and the displays are better. So we have this capability now to build tiny devices that are more capable that we can probably now wear in our eyes and our faces. And then the other one was the industry readiness, right? So there's this investment. When Mark Zuckerberg purchased Oculus, that was basically a plant in the flag and says, hey, we're putting a price on this industry, and a lot of people followed suit. So is that an accurate summarization of that? So yeah, so that's the main differences basically on why we're seeing a resurgence actually in VR right now. I'm going to pull up a question from the audience, which is related to just VR and applications and use cases in general, wherein right now a lot of VR effort is focused on gaming, right? But can you guys think of other experiences where VR can be really powerful or game-changing? So I was working at Google for in 2015, and that's when like the Cardboard came out, and I worked for the Cardboard guys. And Google I/O, all those guys were like, oh, we're gonna segment all these different applications into 3 spaces. One is this Google storytelling, like spotlight storytelling, where you can basically tell stories and movies in VR. The other one is Google Expedition, where you have like educational experience for kids and K-12 to like use VR as a way to learn. And then the other one was obviously gaming. So those are 3, but obviously there's probably more that VR can tackle. So can you guys give us an idea on what else can VR do and what other use cases could VR be like a game changer?
Okay, so I will start first. I think just borrowing the story that I just told, and I think that right now, if you look at AR and VR, it's really, I do a comparison like a cellular phone in the early stage. Now, in the early stage, cellular phones are very, very bulky, right? Number one. No, pretty much like what AR, VR is right now. And the second one is that when the cellular phone just came out of the market, who was using the cellular phone? They are execs. They are company execs doing business, right? So regular people, they had no reason of using cellular phone. So right now, I think the AR, VR is the same thing. Why the gaming market is the first go-to market there? I think there are 2 reasons. Number one is that currently AR, VR is still an enthusiast market. So which means that only you are highly interested about certain things, you go to buy AR, VR. So your everyday moms and pop and grandmas, they may not be able to actually enjoy AR, VR in this form factor. The number 2 actually is very important coming out from my education background at Berkeley, is because the gaming industry has the most ready workforce to be able to develop AR and VR applications. The reason is because if you go to Silicon Valley, we have a lot of engineers. We have engineers working on C++, on designing websites and so forth. But suddenly, if you ask people, can you design a 3D app, right? So it turns out that only the gaming industry has those engineers by education. They know by training how to manipulate 3D objects in space. So that's the reason gaming industry is the first go-to-market. But they may not be the best, or may not be the market of the future that give you the most revenue. Again, going back to the cellular phone, right? The cellular phone start with the high-level execs for doing only business related activities, but it evolved into something else. So that's, I think that what we are looking for is what is the next market, right? So I think that's actually very, very interesting to see.
Right, and I think VR has, it's natural that it starts at the entertainment industry. Like was just mentioned, that's where the workforce is, and that's where a lot of the revenue comes from. But I think it may not be very sustainable in the long term if it only stays there, and also it could be a missed opportunity. So we can, let's look back at computer graphics in the early 80s. It also started in the entertainment industry, and it's there up until today, but it's not just there. We see computer graphics everywhere, from entertainment, filming, and video game, to medical imaging, to architectural design, and pretty much a whole endless different types of domains. So virtual reality, I think, also has huge potential in other industries, and perhaps even longer lasting, because I think there is still some risk of VR, and we may get to that later, but in terms of form factor issues, comfort, that could, we could be in a novelty phase of virtual reality for gaming and entertainment, but that may or may not be sustainable in the long term. However, if we identify applications where virtual reality can really have a large productivity impact, I think that's where the money is for the long run. This could be niche applications, could be widespread applications. We don't necessarily know all that there is, but one thing that I really think is great that over the past 20 years we have as a community, an academic community, been doing was trying to find these applications, and we have lots of existing data that shows that virtual reality is effective, for example, for training, for procedural memorization, for education, for learning things. We learn better in our if we're using our whole body to interact with the environment rather than looking at a flat screen or a static image. So I think academic research, in order to not only improve the user experience, but also to identify opportunities to use VR as the medium of choice is something that is going to get us to the question of what beyond entertainment we can use VR for.
I would also mention that right now the tools are available in VR to prototype objects for manufacturing and architecture to potentially save a lot of time and money on the approval level. When a product is manufactured, say an automobile, traditionally automakers make an enormous maquette out of clay of the automobile. Something like Oculus Medium makes, you can make a similar intangible prototype and put the executives who need to approve this design into a headset, and they don't have to be in the same room. And that could potentially save a lot of time and money. You can have somebody in Pittsburgh and somebody in Shanghai and have a discussion about that consumer item before it's been manufactured. And the same thing is true in the construction industry. Virtual reality is being used a lot for architectural design and approval and saving time and money again.
Yeah, I really like those examples. Like there's an obvious use case for like training, for example. So instead of, we have like the Microsoft classic flight simulator, that's big, in the Windows computers of the old, you have that simulator. But now I think you guys mentioned this earlier in our discussion, where you have now, like, you can train people in VR to, first of all, like, make the simulation as close to reality as possible, right? But then there are also opportunities where you don't have to mimic reality, right? Where you can be in a fantasy world, or you can be like a giant dragon or like a tiny dwarf. Like you can be all these things in VR that you can't necessarily do in, just like a IMAX theater. So is there opportunity in that space, like more creative ways of storytelling?
Absolutely. I hope that as we develop virtual reality content that is more native VR and not, say, an advertising promotional tie-in to a Hollywood film, which is what most big budget VR experiences now are tied in some way to an already known intellectual property. Even Pokemon Go, everyone knows who Pokemon is, who they expect to buy it. So it's not sort of a native VR experience, it's a spin-off or native AR experience. I hope that more and more content creators experiment with VR in a way to explore a new kind of entertainment that would be environmental entertainment and a kind of experiential entertainment. And what does that mean? We don't know quite yet, and that's what's exciting. But every VR experience that content creators particularly try out, they'd say, well, what worked about that and what doesn't work about that? And it's we're building a toolbox to create a grammar of virtual and augmented reality right now. So almost everything you're seeing from an entertainment standpoint, including games, is research and development now. And I'm really hoping that games and more narrative experiences merge. We used to have a book series called Choose Your Own Adventure, where you could decide, I want to open that door and go down that hallway or go down that room. I'm hoping it will be more seamless than that, with gaze-based selection and more perceptual computing, I think it's called, where you can tell I'm a filmmaker, not a tech person. But the merging of these with entertainment, I hope will take us somewhere else that's completely different in the way that a film is different from a book and a sculpture is different from a painting.
Yeah. So there's an interesting, you made an interesting point there where when we consume movies right now, it's basically a one-directional experience, right? The screen is giving you something. But it seems like in VR, it could be bi-directional where you can interact. Like you have input mechanisms like what you mentioned, like gaze or even the controllers or something like that to basically choose your own adventure in that type of experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, we don't need to be constrained to our physical abilities in VR. And that's true for entertainment and finding ways to tell stories that wouldn't be available in other media, and also that just from our own ability to interact with the real world is not possible. But we can think also of how we can leverage that for actual productivity and to be able to do things that we're not able to in the real world. So, for example, in VR, we're able to travel in time. We're able to travel in space very long distances. We can go light years in seconds. We're able to change our scale. What is that good for? So, for example, if I'm looking at a huge data set, how can I navigate this data in a way that it's going to be meaningful to me? I'm going to be able to digest this information. But if and would it be possible for me to do just looking in a traditional sense? And a lot of research and development needs to be done in order to identify ways to interact, techniques that we can use in order to use this, what we call, we can call a hyper reality. It's beyond just what is real. We can almost be X-Men in terms of the way that we can manipulate the data and interact with it. So I absolutely think that virtual reality should be used, of course, with caution in terms of we should not just do something for the sake of it because we can. We need to find what are the best ways to deliver a quality user experience that's going to be intuitive and well understood by the user. But once we have that, I think we certainly should go for it and be able to go from here to the other side of the world without having to spend the time that we live in real life.
So I want to spend a little bit of time to going back to what I talked about. The virtual reality could be the last screen for entertainment. I think that the reason is that just look at how Steve Jobs sold the idea of iPhone, right? So he didn't sell the iPhone as a new thing that is in a intergalactic travel. They actually sold the iPhone as really tangible that you can use on a daily basis. You can put amount of hours you will spend on iPhone doing certain things. You can also spend amount of dollar that you can you will spend purchasing those contents. So in this case for virtual reality, let me just make one more case. So the case actually for why it's good for entertainment. Now for entertainment, if you really look at 3D, and people actually try 3D TV, and in 2016, all of the TV manufacturers exited 3D, so they don't make 3D TV anymore. And also for IMAX, I think one of the big selling points for IMAX is also 3D. However, so there are numbers, actually I don't know if all of you know, about a quarter of the people going into IMAX, they cannot perceive 3D. So watching IMAX 3D will make roughly a quarter of the population sick. The reason is because when you produce 3D content, so you have to actually produce different images between your left eye and right eye. Now when you do that, you actually also have to set an IPD, the so-called IPD. So that's actually the distances between the two images. So when you actually get a prescription glasses, actually not only you need to get the right prescription per eye, you also have to measure the distance. Now, if you set that, in an IMAX theater, you can only set an average IPD, right? So that is actually the center that most of people will actually have. But then what happened to the tail end? So those are the people that cannot consume 3D in traditional TV or theater. Now, if you present just doing simple things like presenting 3D content on a pair of glasses, then you can actually individually adjust the IPD so that we can guarantee that most of the people can consume 3D. So even in that very, very simple task, we have already see that in the right way, virtual reality actually can outperform traditional TV and the movie theaters. So I think that's actually a strong argument to make that I think that virtual reality is going to stay, so, and then it's going to differentiate itself enough from augmented reality.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and also very pragmatic. You have a very clear use case on the limitations and other potentials for those types of 3D technologies. Let me take a step back real quickly, and I'm going to pull in one of the interesting questions here on VR from the questions in the audience about like the social dynamics of VR. So right now, VR is very inclusive. It's just like a one-to-one experience, basically. So someone mentioned here, how do you think about making VR more social? How does that work? Do you guys have any insights on that?
So starting from myself, I wouldn't say that today I know all the answers. Again, what I'm trying to, my sense actually is that the most challenge right now, the highest challenge right now for AR and VR actually is to make everyday consumer understand what they are doing. So the reason is because right now, no matter how much price that you are putting the dollar sign on AR and VR, so the consumers are primarily enthusiasts. So I think there's a long way to educate the everyday consumer how they're going to use AR and VR. So the company is making an effort to really bring down the technology into daily activities people can associate with. That's, I think, really, really important. And the second one, I just want to echo the other panelists mentioned, is that we also need to educate content creators, especially our directors. Right now, when we talk to a lot of really top A-list directors, they are really worried about taking a risk to produce a virtual reality movies. Because when you create content in virtual reality, it becomes non-linear. So you cannot force audience to actually follow the direction of your director to follow your story. So there's a way, there's actually a process to educate, also get our directors to be educated about how to produce content in high quality. And I think that these are some of the challenges that probably will be facing virtual reality and in the future, in the very, very near future.
Social VR, I was going to come back to social VR. What's possible right now, and I think that the consumers will really enjoy, is Facebook released on their latest SDK social VR rooms, where you can congregate with up to 8 people with access, obviously, to Facebook's with Oculus access, and you can invite them from all over the world, the 8 people, to congregate in the same room as avatars. And they're also having easily modifiable avatars. A particular interest of mine is to try to educate the public on how to inhabit avatars and adopt that in a fun way. And I'm hoping that the public will be open to having non-human avatars, and perhaps with extra limbs, and learn how to manipulate those and practice their homuncular flexibility and sort of embody a completely different world in virtual reality than the one we have here. My fear is that people will use sort of Photoshop Facetune equivalents to make their best self in VR, and I really hope that we make our fantastic self in VR.
That's a great point.
Yeah, and well, I think that already is the case with online dating and all of that. So it's just an extension. What I would say in terms of how can we make VR sociable, I would categorize 2 different types of social. One is immediate proximal socializing, and another one is remote socializing, which we can call telepresence. So There's a challenge with current VR technology where you strap on a head-mounted display, you're completely disconnected to your immediate surroundings. There is some technology that is being developed to integrate elements of the real world around you and reconstruct that in VR using depth cameras such as the Kinect. That's one way of solving that. And I say that because for some people, it might be okay, but and it is to play a game and you're even more engaged in the game. You feel more presence because you don't see any of the environment around you. But then you have friends in the room. You want to socialize with them. You want to interact with them while you're playing, but you don't see them. You also can have safety concerns where you may have furniture around you. You have the so-called cat problem. The cat just walks into the room and you don't see that. We're just talking about, I think, a recent project of a startup. They actually put a tracker in the cat, so you see the cat coming in. But I think that is the way to solve that is to integrate, and I think that's one of the directions of the technology is to a merge of augmented and virtual reality. And virtual reality would be a special case of augmented reality when you basically completely block out the transparent display. The other kind of VR, of social VR is telepresence, and Marcy mentioned Facebook, and I think that actually is a huge benefit from socializing on your phone and just typing things where it's very difficult to convey emotion, it's difficult to convey irony, sarcasm, and things like that. Within a social VR room, you'd be able to do that.
So that's multiple ways to. I really like how you've segmented the social problem here. One is the proximate social problem where you're basically screened off from the entire world, and the other one is the remote problem. I think that's a really good way to think about how you can understand the challenges for both different areas. Related to social and mostly entertainment, I've seen a lot of questions here about like adult movies. Like adult industry always is like the innovators, or not like the earliest adopters of new technology. And this is mostly just talking from a business perspective. I don't think we're all capable or qualified to comment on the adult industry, but just in general, is there like market for it, or is there some form of what's the promise? And I'm just trying to address the questions that are here on the slides. It's not my own personal opinion.
Well, I'll give a little shout out to my friend Ella Darling, who is the first VR cam girl, and she has her own VR startup company. I think it's 4Cam VR, and she's an adult entertainer and also a physics major in college, and she is a startup founder and a member of Women in VR like myself. And I think as long as the performers are treated as ethically as possible, I don't have a problem with it as a form of entertainment that goes back probably to dirty drawings in the dirt. But it exists. It's as long as it's as ethical as possible, I don't see a problem with it any more than any other outlet for pornography.
That's a great point. You guys want to chime in, or is that enough?
I'm good. I agree. I think it's just a medium, and I think that's the thing about virtual reality. If we see it as a new type of medium, anything is game, really, and it should be as open and as available for whatever uses that other media is available.
That's a good point.
I don't know if we are live or not, but so let me just say, going back to the technical part. Remember, I mentioned that in terms of content creation, really the challenge is on directors, creators, to really how to create nonlinear storytelling. But I think that for the adult industry not to address itself, I think that there is an advantage because you can, as audience, you are drawn to a focal point that you don't diverge too much. I think that is, from the technical point of view, the advantage of the adult industry content making versus other type of content.
Okay, I think we can close this discussion. There's obviously lots of possibilities here, but again, I think not necessarily that specific example, but if you just take a step back and say, oh, VR is a platform, and whatever content you can create on it, you can use it to its advantage. And so I think all these different possibilities and examples are all, possible in VR. And you just have to be creative to apply it to your specific use case or industry. Going back to the adoption and women in VR and things like that, one topic that I always think in my head is, the Google Glass was a particularly promising example, but then a lot of people were, had adverse feelings towards how it's being marketed. It's like very focused to a very, specific group of people, and a lot of people, who are not necessarily drawn to the fashion sense of it or the social implications of it, took a step back. It's like, I don't think we're ready for this kind of thing. Do you think, how do you make VR, especially, let's say the headset form factor, more amenable to a more general audience? Like, how do you make it more fashionable? How do you make it like sexy? And I'm just trying to echo some of the questions that I've seen here on the spreadsheet. You guys have any ideas on that?
I was going to say Alan's headset looked pretty good that I was seeing up there. Yeah, the headsets are not very fashion forward right now, and a lot of people are concerned about their hair and makeup. When I demo to people, a lot of people are reluctant to put the headset on. And there's the looking silly factor and the being closed off from everyone else. You don't know if your little brother is going to play a prank on you if you have a headset on, or safety factors, I think are very important. In terms of encouraging a broad spectrum of consumers to use VR, I think that the best thing we can do as an industry is to do as much demoing as possible. Things like Google Cardboard is an excellent example of good outreach. The New York Times sending out 1 million Google Cardboards to its subscribers. The more we can get people to try it, the better. And gamers, as has been mentioned, they know this is for them. They have the PCs in general. The games are probably the most sophisticated VR content, most attractive. Right now it's games. So combination of accessibility and content geared towards a wider audience. And they will come, I think so.
Yeah, and like I mentioned before, I think once we have, so VR is, and we saw from the first talk, I think, how VR hasn't reached its inflection point yet for wide adoption. And I think it's still an enabling technology. It's very early on in its stages of development. It's gonna get smaller, it's gonna get higher quality, it's gonna get better. So, just like with any early technology, you have the enthusiasts, we saw all that, and I think we are at that stage now that only tech-savvy people, or mostly tech-savvy people, are going to engage strongly in it, but as the technology advances, form factors are gonna get smaller. I believe that within the next 10 years, we're gonna have much less obtrusive form factors like glasses, and even eventually further down the line contact lenses type devices that are going to allow us to interact and to experience the virtual reality environments in a much more integrated way with our surroundings and our own self-perception. The other point that I would like to make, which comes with all of this, is, and it's something that would afford a whole new panel discussion, is privacy. Because these devices, not only they can display to us, they also can sense the surroundings. They're going to have cameras. And our whole sense of privacy over the past 20 years has changed completely, and it's pretty much an illusion now, but it's going to be even more of that, and there will have to be ethical discussions surrounding.
That's a good point.
So I will say that people may ask investors or entrepreneurs, is it too late to making yet another VR headset today? I think that there's still argument to be made. The reason I think is really if you really want to make a virtual reality device to that aspect, also augmented reality, to really cross the bar for grandpa, grandma, and moms and pops to use them, you have to make them as easy to use as watching an IMAX. And then watching an IMAX in terms of really the resolution, and also in terms of you can really sit back, relax, and enjoy the show for 2 hours. So right now, for all the devices on the market, try to wear that for 30 minutes or an hour. So you will sweat like an animal. So I think that in order to really for virtual reality to become a household product, not an enthusiast product. So I think that there is still a lot of innovation to be made. I think until then the hardware of virtual reality will become commoditized, just like TV. Now everybody can go to Best Buy and buy a TV, and TV A and TV B, there aren't too many differences. So at that time, it makes sense to become Netflix. You only make content, but then you don't make TV anymore because the TV is everywhere.
Yeah, that's a great point. So basically, like, no one company can, make a dent in terms of making this fully adoptable. It's kind of like an ecosystem of groups. Like, they have to all agree that, hey, we want it to be more amenable to all sorts of kinds of people, and the experiences should be, delivered across all these different social status and genders and gaps and all of that to make it more adoptable, like how the iPhone is right now. So we have about 5 more minutes for our panel. I'd just like to ask more generic questions. And for a lot of the audiences right now are, they want to like find a job in VR. Or they want to know what does it take to like start their own VR company, or maybe just very basic, like what skills do they need to learn in order to be part of this industry? Like if I'm a student, what skills do I need to learn so that I can have like a VR in the future? Or is there going to be a major in VR at some point at CMU? What do you guys think?
All right, great question. Now I'm going to lean in. I think that first of all, Immerx, open for business. If anybody want to apply for positions, contact us. And also let me switch my hat to Berkeley. In Berkeley we have an AR and VR initiative, not competition to CMU. I think great universities is both of us. So in Berkeley, we actually just launched a Master of Engineering degree in AR and VR. So we are going to teach an introductory course in virtual reality and immersive computing starting fall of 2017. So welcome you guys to actually to check it out and also apply to our master and PhD degree. For PhD, we have another institution, Center for Augmented Cognition. We have now more than 12 faculty members over there. So one thing I think that I want to emphasize is that we are actually looking at AR and VR not just as a research project. We are really actually addressing education as a market as a whole. So to this end, in our Center for Augmented Cognition, we have faculty members from computer science, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, journalism, architecture, business, and performing arts. So we are really actually trying to extend AR and VR into all the corners, at least at Berkeley, and hopefully using Berkeley as a launching pad to address a lot of other problems. So thank you for the question. If you have any questions about finding a job, please contact me.
All right, keep that in mind, guys.
All right, so I'm gonna put my plug into if you want to go to graduate school, consider Duke University. We have a great program there in robotics and virtual reality. In a more specific sense, what do you guys need to do to start developing VR experiences? So the technical answer is very little, which is we are really lucky today, or you are really lucky, that we are at a stage of software development technologies that you really don't need to have a computer science degree in order to develop a compelling experience in Unity, for example, and a very good one. From a user experience standpoint is, the answer that I would have is, be very attentive to design. Be very careful to not make something that only looks good but behaves very weirdly, is not intuitive. Read books about human-computer interaction and design. It's even more important to think about HCI principles, where you're designing 3D user interfaces than it is when you're designing traditional desktop interfaces, because your space is much more wide. Your design space is much wider and unconstrained. So it gives you lots of power, but like they would say, with great power comes great responsibility. So be careful with that. And even though you can design something, or you can develop something that looks good, doesn't necessarily mean that it's gonna act good. So that's my takeaway.
And I would say from an entertainment perspective, Unity or Unreal are the things to learn, and you will not go hungry in Los Angeles if you know those. And I would encourage people to take an interest also in WebVR, because I think that designing for WebVR and providing products that make it easier for other people to design in WebVR is going to become very important in the next year or two.
Okay, I'm just gonna add a little plug-in that I'm a computer science student, but I specialize in human-computer interaction. So yes, I agree to you. That's my little plug. I don't think we have any more time. Shall we give all our fantastic panelists a big round of applause? And if you guys have any questions, feel free to email the organizers, and we'll forward them to our panelists, and hopefully you get some responses. All of their profiles are hopefully in the book that you guys have, and so if you have any questions directed to our panelists, you're welcome to do so. Again, thank you very much for your attention, and we'll have a little break. But thank you.